Welcome to the Corner Booth Podcast. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Leslie Chesterman, Bill Brownstein, and our special guest today, Conservative Party of Quebec leader Éric Duhaime. Mr. Duhaime, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We appreciate you taking the time, so let's jump right into it. I know you've done a lot of media in the past little while, and I know you've been asked as well on the election trail, which, by the way, this idea of not yet being in an official election campaign, but every day getting more information, I think Elections Quebec said they're going to look into this. What do you think about that, the idea that we've already started, even though we shouldn't have?
Well, I mean, we already know the date of the election. The Premier could actually have called the election already. Like, according to the law, he could have done it this week. He chose to do it at last minute because he wants to spend more, because we know that the CAQ has much more money than all the other parties together, and we see it with the advertisement. They're spending like there's no tomorrow, and they want to do it until the limit. So obviously it's an advantage that shouldn't be there, but the fact that we have fixed election date, I've always been someone who supported that, because I think it's fair for all parties to know when the election is going to be called. But the problem is always the spending of where do we put the limit, and I'm glad that the Elections Quebec is going to look into it.
So let's talk spending. I know you said that as you traveled across the province, we're not talking according to you. You don't hear about language, you don't hear about identity politics. What you hear about is inflation and the cost of living. Now, every party is going to address that. What's your plan to address it?
Well, we think, we've never seen inflation like that. People are concerned about the grocery store bills, about the gas, the price of gas. They're concerned about the interest rate going up the roof, and they're trying to make, ends meet. And our policy is to propose the biggest tax cut in Quebec's history. We want something very, very substantial, a few $1,000s for an average family, and we do believe that it's important to give back money to people, and it's the government who should try to squeeze its budget a little bit to give room, to give fresh air to all families in Quebec. We want to suspend tax on gas because we do believe that it's having a domino impact, especially in the regions where you don't have a choice to use your car to go to your workplace. You can't cut into that. So we think it's time for government to downsize a bit and to give a little bit room for people, and that's our policies in terms of economic development.
So the first question we will all have is, how are we going to pay for that?
Well, there's three ways we want to pay with that. First off, we are not socialist or leftist. We don't believe that it's the role of the state to do like Mr. Fitzgibbon, the Minister of Economy, does, and distribute checks to everybody. We do believe it's time to downsize, and it's time to stop those checks to multinationals. Secondly, we do agree with the CAQ during the last campaign when they were saying it was time to downsize the state and cut 5,000 public workers. Instead of doing that, they've increased the size of the Quebec government by 72,000 people more in working for the government. So we think it's time to go on the other way around. And thirdly, but not the less, we want to make sure that we exploit our natural resources. We know that Quebec has oil and gas. We know that the CAQ promised 4 years ago to exploit our oil and gas in Quebec. Unfortunately, they betrayed. People who, like me, voted for them, and they even adopted 2 months ago a bill to forbid any kind of exploitation on our land. With what's going on in Europe now, when we see that Germany is going back with coal factories to centrals to make sure that they could meet ends during the winter that is coming up, because they've been cut their gas from Russia because of the war in Ukraine. Well, Canada should be supporting them, and Quebec should be supporting them by our own gas. That would be much better for the environment than using coal like they're going to do over the winter. So those are the kind of policies that we think could bring richness and development in Quebec to pay for those tax cuts.
So,
Mr. Duhaime, many believe that your party will be the official opposition after the next election, that you will surpass the Liberals. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean a whole lot if the CAQ is projected to win as many seats as they are projected to be. But many of those considering voting for you will be Anglophones, Allophones, and all the rest. What do you, on some levels, I know that your values vis-a-vis Bill 96, you have some opinions. Bill 21, though, you are in support of. You made a comment, in fact, lately about the fact that you didn't want to receive a booster shot from someone in a hijab and a kippah or anything else. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. First off, you're right about the Anglophone community or the non-Francophone, and it's kind of a surprise for us, honestly, because as you know, I'm from Quebec City. That's where the party is most well known. That's where we're the strongest by far, and we were expecting to make inroads in Quebec City first and foremost, but we saw that among non-Francophones we're now even higher than among Francophones, and that for me is very important for the unity of Quebec, because seeing that a party is as popular among Anglophones and Francophones, I don't think we've seen that in our lifetime. Usually the Liberals are always very, very strong among Anglophones, and the Separatist Party historically has always been more strong among Francophones, but a party that breaks even with the both groups, both linguistic groups, I think that's something very positive, because we're splitting on other issues than language, and which is good for Quebec. The second question you're asking me is about Bill 21. You're right. Personally, I do believe that every citizen has a right to have services offered by a public servant that is neutral. Nobody should impose their bias or their views, their religious views. I do believe in freedom of religion, obviously. Everybody has a right, and even in my party, and I've been accused of that. But on the other hand, when you have public services, you have a right to have neutral services, and that's why I supported the Bill 21.
But even Premier Legault got a vaccination, I believe, from somebody wearing head cover.
I saw that.
And I wonder if that would be used against you. And when you have to consider that a lot of Anglos are very, very strongly against Bill 21, certainly with regard to head coverings, teaching.
It's interesting what you're saying, because first off, we had that debate a few years ago. It was very divisive. I think it's not time for Quebecers to divide on such issues, especially not between Anglophones and Francophones. If there were another bill pre-table, I can tell you that a strong majority of Quebecers do support Bill 21, and it would be a lost cause for anybody who wants to bring it back. It would only make more feuds, but I'm not sure that it's going to improve anything that people are complaining against right now. And I think, honestly, with the inflation going up, with our healthcare system that is completely inefficient, I think it's not the first concern of anybody. Nobody's talking to me about Bill 21 when I go door knocking or when I meet people everywhere. You can go around the restaurant here, and I bet $100 that no one's going to tell you that their priority is Bill 21.
Okay, I'm going to stop you, though. You're probably right. That's not anyone's priority, but I'm sure if you asked a lot of people, and I would say a majority of people, if they have a problem with a woman wearing a hijab teaching math to your child, they would have a problem with that. So what do you say to those people? Because you talk about individual freedoms. That's one of the monikers of your party. It's a contradiction in terms to suggest individual freedoms, but I don't have the individual freedom to wear a kippah or a hijab in a service like teaching, for example.
I don't think there's a contradiction, because personally, I'm the first openly gay conservative leader in Canada's history. There's never been a leader of a party, provincially or federally, that was openly gay. It's the first time that happens. Me personally, I know that some religions have opinions or values regarding homosexuality, and it's their rights. But as a citizen, as a taxpayer, when I'm interacting with the state, can I make sure that religious bias doesn't show? Can I have a right to have, completely secular services? And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to talk to you about Morocco, because it's a country where I lived in the past, and I've traveled a lot with Royal Air Maroc, which is the national airline. Girls working for the stewards that work for Royal Air Maroc have no right to wear a hijab. It doesn't mean that the Islamic Kingdom of Morocco is Islamophobic. It means that they're respecting their clients, and they have a right to have a neutral service. And this is what Bill 21 in my book is all about.
Okay, again, I don't want to have a debate on Bill 21. I would disagree with you.
No, but it's okay.
And that's fine.
Some of my candidates disagree with me, and you know what? At the end of the day, what is important is that they represent the will of their constituents. And if they disagree with me, and if they can show me that their constituents want them to vote otherwise, I would allow them to vote however their constituents want. I'm not there to impose my view. Okay. I'm here to participate to the debate, and I do believe a majority of Quebecers agree with me, but if not, fine.
Speaking of one of your candidates,
yes.
I do believe believe that one of them said that they had the right to turn down serving somebody who was gay, I do believe.
Well, it's Dr. Roy Heapin, who is gay himself. What he said, and he said
Regardless,
he said that a decade ago, and what he said is that he's against that. He wouldn't sponsor any kind of business that does that, but he doesn't believe that it's the state's role to do that. It should be the people to be responsible and behave properly and not sponsor establishments who do that. I mean, we can agree or disagree, but philosophically, it's an interesting debate.
Well, he also said he doesn't support the idea of the state getting involved in anti-discrimination. Do you?
Well, at certain limit, yes, but not too much. For example, there's gyms in Montreal that don't allow men to go in. Some people would argue that it goes against the Charter of Rights and Freedom because you shouldn't discriminate between men and women. But we understand that some girls want to work out with other girls and they don't want men to look at them or to bug them or whatever. And I do respect that. And I do agree that they shouldn't allow men if that's the will of a private business. It should be the owner that decides.
So it's not a hard yes or no. It's depending on a situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Is that discrimination? I'm not even sure.
Understood.
I want to ask a question about childcare.
Yes.
Okay, because this is I'm kind of baffled by this because it's one of the great success stories of the CPA system in Quebec. I have two kids who went through the CPA system, and I did both private daycare and the CPA system, and I'm shocked that you actually would want to get rid of this.
I don't want to get rid of it, but for me, it's not. We cannot say it's a success when 52,000 kids are on waiting lists in Quebec right now.
Yes, so shouldn't we expand it?
Well, we've been talking about it for 20 years. Every single government, in every single election, all parties are promising to get rid of the waiting list, and unfortunately, the waiting list is worse than ever. So what are we going to do? What we're saying is that there's people who do not have access, but they're paying. Those 52,000 parents are paying for that, and they don't have a service. That's unfair. And there's also people, and more now, because of the crisis, many people now work at home more. There's a lot of parents who do not work from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And can we also give a hand to those parents who need only 2 days or who work over the weekend or by night? Or can the state be more neutral, and can we truly help the parents instead of a system, a public monopoly? And that's what conservatives are proposing. We're proposing for those who do not have access to the public daycare to give a check, $200 per week per kid, to make sure that they also have a service and they're not put aside and they're not forgotten.
So you don't want to disband the system?
No, I want to reinforce those who do not have access to it.
I have another question also. I heard you talk about education, because it's always such a big issue. Do you want to keep subsidizing private schools when our public schools are falling apart?
Well, I do believe in competition. I do believe that, if our public schools do have some programs, international programs, sports, music, arts, all sorts of things, it's because of the pressure of the private sector, and they had to adapt because the parents were asking for more. So for me, competition is good, and I do believe that we have a system in education that works much better than healthcare, where we don't have the competition, and we see the state of the healthcare system right now in Quebec. And I think that we shouldn't fix something that is working well, and we should fix instead our healthcare system and bring competition there instead of eliminating competition in education.
But even this morning they were talking about there aren't enough teachers, classroom sizes are going to get bigger. They're using orthopedagogue now to be teachers in classes. This is a huge crisis.
We're talking of the public management of the system, and you're absolutely right. I saw one school out of 2 now is lacking teachers as we speak. I also saw that the ventilation systems, we've been talking a lot during the crisis about the importance of fresh air for our kids. They got the money and they didn't even do it yet. I also see that the school buses are a problem now. Many parents will have to carry their kids to the school because the state is not even able to provide such a service. For me, that's the mismanagement of a public monopoly. If there were more competition, I'm sure that the private schools are not going to suffer as much of those problems. They're going to find a way. But it's so huge and it's so bureaucratic with the public system. But unfortunately, it's parents at the end of the day that are going to be put aside because their kids are not going to have a teacher or not a school driver or no fresh air in their class.
So what would you do?
Well, I think we need competition. I think we should focus on what's essential. Having teachers in classes when the class returns. I think it should be the priority. Where was the government? What are they doing? Yes, there's a shortage, but why is there a shortage? When you hired 72,000 bureaucrats more than instead of getting rid of 5,000 like they promised when they got elected, it means that you have 78,000 jobs now that are not fulfilled because of the manpower shortage. So the government needs to do a role of leadership and focus on what is essential and forget about the rest.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by Guaranteed Industries. Beat the heat and stay comfortable all year round with a Lennox air conditioning system from Guaranteed, a Lennox premier dealer, residential, commercial, and industrial, guaranteedindustries.com. So let me go to something to kind of rewind. It was pretty low-hanging fruit to go after the CAC over the pandemic and the way they handled the pandemic. And in fact, I think you probably agree that with enough people angry over, conditions and rules, impositions, curfews, a lot of people look to you because you came out and made it a point of saying...
I wouldn't be in politics if the crisis didn't happen.
That's why you got involved to begin with?
Yes, because I saw the parliament that was unanimous. I saw 4 parties saying the exact same thing. I saw week after week tens of thousands of people protesting in the streets of all cities across Quebec, and nobody was able to talk for them. We're in our parliament. And for me, there was a shortage, a democratic shortage, and we need to fulfill that gap. I do believe in democracy. I traveled around the world. I've put my life on the line. I went in war zones to promote democracy, and I was seeing that in Quebec, a huge percentage, I don't know which percentage we are, we're going to figure it out on October 3rd, but a huge percentage of the population agreed with me, and those people were not represented for the last 2 years in the National Assembly. This needs to stop. We need to have people who represent us. The opposition shouldn't be in the streets, it needs to be in Parliament, and this is what we're going to do on October 3rd. We're going to bring those people around the table where the decisions are made, not just to protest. That's what a democratic society is all about, and even those who disagree with us should command us for what we're doing, because we want to solve this in a pacific way, in a democratic way, and this is what the Conservative Party is all about.
What would you have done differently during the pandemic?
That's my question.
Exactly.
Sure. Well, you're the government now. You're dealing with a pandemic that no one saw coming. What would you have done?
I would have done what they're doing right now, which means they're giving us recommendation, but there's nothing compulsory. The role of public health is to inform people of what's going on. I would have done what they've done in Sweden, what they've done in Florida, what they've done in many states around the world. I would have taken people for smart people who are able to make decisions for themselves, for their families, for their lives, and I would have protected the vulnerables who were under the institutions of the government. What we've done is the exact opposite. 7,000 people died in institutions that were managed by the government, and because of the mismanagement of the government's business, he closed the business of the others. And this makes no sense, and this is what we've been complaining about. And it's true that everybody had measures all around the world. What is different in Quebec is that we were by far the worst on the continent. And actually, if you look at the record, we're the worst in terms of debt of all Canadian provinces, even if we had the worst measures, even if we had the worst curfews, even like the restaurants like the one where we are right now were shut down the most of all everywhere in America.
Have done that?
No, I would have done that. I would have informed people from the recommendations. Public health recommendations would have been neutral. I wouldn't have done politics with them. I wouldn't have done press conferences with the director of public health. They would have given their recommendation to the population. I would have said, to people, this is what we're recommending you, but I wouldn't have forced anyone to do something against their will.
Would you have imposed mask mandates?
Well, no, I think the mask should have been at the beginning. We have to split though the beginning of the crisis, because at the beginning, and it's normal, we were all scared because it was unknown. We didn't know what was going on. But the fact that we were the last place in America to still have a compulsory mask, that for me is a shame. I mean, there's no. At the end of the day, we didn't even know what was scientific evidence and what was politics. And we found out afterwards. To this day, we're still waiting to see one single study showing us that the curfew in Quebec saved lives. We're still waiting. When they said that they shut down the restaurants, François Legault said it was a recommendation of public health. A few months later, Dr. Arruda in the Parliamentary Commission said it was not true. He never told them to shut down the restaurants. It was a political decision. How many other political decisions that we don't know about? And that's what scares me, because there's restaurants like this one who shut down, who went through hell, employees who lost their jobs, and that was based on political decisions. And the worst of them all, they were even lying and saying it was a public health measure.
But there are still restaurants that are shutting down when somebody in the staff gets COVID today.
Yeah, but that's a decision of the restaurant. If they want to do it, I do believe in the private sector in individual freedom. If a restaurant owner wants to shut down, they can do it. But that the government forbids you to open your restaurant, that for me makes no sense.
I have a question. Here in Quebec City.
I want to stop for one second just to go back to this if we're going to shift off that question. That question is, when I hear you say, had you been the premier, had you been in power, you would have left the decision to people, to the average citizen. They're smart, they know what to do. And my initial reaction to that is, we're not doctors or epidemiologists. Nor is Mr. Virus. There's a new pandemic. I want to do whatever I can to protect myself and my family. And if public health says the best information we have now is there's a vaccine and the vaccine works, why is that wrong?
It's not. Mr. Legault neither is an expert. He's not a scientific neither.
Fauci had the same problems in the States, though, and he is a doctor and scientist.
Nor is Mr. Dubé, who's also an accountant, the Minister of Health. They could make recommendations. Public health has a right to make recommendations. It's not their mandate to impose anything. That's a political decision at the end of the day. It's always
whose mandate should that be? There's a deadly virus going around. Who should have the final word to
hospitals were
citizens?
overrun. Hospitals were the ones who wanted the shutdowns because they couldn't cope.
Okay, so we shut down everybody because the government is managing the hospitals, and it was true, by the way, before the COVID arrived. The problem with our healthcare system has nothing to do with COVID. It's been going on for 40 years. So I don't think that was the solution, and I still believe. And you know what? How come today we are in the 7th wave? There was more cases. 8th wave. The 8th starting now, but the 7th is ending. But okay, how come now we have no measures? And we went during this wave with more people in hospital and more cases than the last winter. How come now they're not imposing measures? Don't you see that it's political?
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by National Carpet. Timeless classic styles in carpets and area rugs from the finest mills around the world. Professional installation and design services no matter how big or small the job. National Carpet online at tapinational.com.
You're a Quebec City guy.
Yes.
Montreal has felt, rightly so, it's been taken for granted by the CAQ, and largely because the CAQ doesn't need Montreal. CAQ can get a majority without Montreal at all. What would you do? I mean, all the more so since you are not from Montreal. What are your feelings about changing that, trying to get some Montreal more attention to the city and not letting us feel taken for granted?
Elected, yes.
Well, Montreal has the same problem as the Anglophone community, which means that nobody's talking to them during the election because the Liberals took you for granted for centuries.
True.
And the other parties don't even listen or talk to you. François Legault is Premier of Quebec. He was doing a debate with the English community 4 years ago. Now he doesn't even have time to talk to 1 million Quebecers.
Yes.
And we can blame François Legault, and we need to blame François Legault, but we also need to look at the English community in Quebec and say, look, if you keep voting Liberal without asking any questions and accept being hostage of the Liberal Party, that's going to happen for another century.
Okay, I've heard you say this 1,000 times, this idea of the Anglos being held hostage.
Well,
Tell me what that means.
It means that election after
We
election...
have no place to go, is what he said.
No, but election after election, there is no election in the west end of Montreal. Election after election, before we even count one single vote, we already know that 17 constituencies are going to go Liberal without any question. Is that democracy? I don't think so. Anglophones have a right to have a real debate.
We do have
and
no
stop
choice.
being taken for granted. And the Liberals took you so much for granted that they went on Bill 96 and they proposed amendments that were even worse than the CAQ. Can you believe that? And then they flip-flopped.
Speaking of Bill 96, and your opinion.
Well, my opinion, I was against Bill 96 when I read it the first time. I mean, and it's not even because of language. I've read that 38 articles of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Quebec were subtracted from the bill, so which means that a citizen cannot contest, even if his rights and freedoms are violated, the bill. After all what we've been through over the last 2 years, I thought it made no sense to put that in that bill, so I was against it from day one, and our only member of the National Assembly, Claire Sanson, voted against it. And we were against it from the beginning. We didn't flip-flop 2-3 times like
So
the
it's not
Liberals.
conditionally, you're just against the entire bill.
Exactly, because, and I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but and I know many Anglophones share my views, and many Francophones as well. I feel that François Legault did it as a political tactic. I'm not even sure, French is not better protected today than it was before Bill 96 was adopted. Come on. The reason why he did it is because he wanted to suck up the few votes left in the Parti Québécois on eve of the
Will
election.
that cost you Francophone votes?
At one point in politics, you know, you have to stand up for what makes sense. The reason why the party went up, and you just talked about it, is because we were defending rights and freedoms and democracy over the last 2 years in Quebec. We cannot arrive and on Bill 96 say, oh, we're going to forget about rights and democracy and freedoms. I mean, it's just to be coherent. That's what unites us as conservative.
Right. So speaking of rights and freedoms, maybe I'm going off on a new topic, and it's also using the word conservative values. Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm pro-choice.
Okay.
And it's a federal issue, though. We have to admit it's not the members at the National Assembly will not vote on that. I'm not a social conservative, obviously, as you can figure it out. I'm more of the libertarian wing of the conservative movement, and I've always been. That being said, it's not on the agenda because there's never been any bills adopted at the National Assembly on that issue.
And
right,
again,
but of course, women are worried with what's going on down south, and members of your party too aren't all aligned with your way of thinking.
No, but it's the policy of the party, and they know it. I also agree with religious freedom, as I said earlier. I know that especially ethnic communities, when they arrive in Quebec, the first or second generation, they're more socially conservative, they're more religious, and I understand that, and I don't think we should exclude people who have religious belief from the public space. I was very shocked when I heard François Legault and Dominique Anglade coming out and saying that candidates who are pro-life shouldn't have a right to run for a party. For me, that's not my definition of democracy. If those people have their personal views when they go at their church, their mosque, or their synagogue, it's okay. As far as when they're in Parliament, they can't go there, and they have to follow the party's policy on that.
I have one last thing before we wrap up. The other day, Colin Standish, who you're familiar with, accused you of the party of being nativist. In other words, xenophobic in a sense. He talked about your immigration policy containing some clauses that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So what is your immigration policy?
Well, it's fun because we were accused of not having immigration in our platform a few days ago as well, because we didn't put it as one of the 6 elements that we're campaigning on. The immigration policy, first off, you have to know that there was a debate. We had 800 members united in Quebec City last November, and we've adopted our program, not our platform. Our electoral platform was revealed last week, but our program was a few months ago. I propose that on immigration, we increase or decrease the immigration ratio depending on the employment rate. So when there's a shortage, we should have more immigrants. When there's huge unemployment, we should have less. The party didn't agree with me. They voted the exact same thing as the CAQ, which means to lower the number of immigrants. But even with the numbers they're giving, it's higher than France or the United States per capita, than way higher. It's not, and I find it very dangerous to accuse people in Quebec who say that we should freeze immigration to a certain level of being accused of xenophobia or racism, because it doesn't help the debate. We should have a very strong debate. Right now, even those who are promoting immigration, like in Ottawa with Justin Trudeau, look at the delays when somebody wants, for example, to bring someone here or a seasonal worker. It takes months and now even years, and businesses have to pay $10,000, $15,000, hire professionals because it's becoming so complicated and so bureaucratic. So those people who are pro-immigration, how come they're putting in place such a mechanism that is totally wasteful?
What would you do?
I would shorten it up. I know that Jason Kenney, the former Minister of Immigration in Ottawa, who's now Premier of Alberta, did that. He was trying to shorten the delays, and I think that's the thing to do. Even if you say no to the immigrant, at least he has an answer in a reasonable delay. But right now, it makes no sense to make people wait a year or two.
And also, are you, as the CAQ wants, trying to wrest control of immigration from the federal government, so Quebec controls it entirely?
There's a lot of duplication, obviously, on immigration, and it's one of the reasons why the delays are so short. I think having one person to manage it instead of two and overlapping, I don't think it's a good reason. That being said, it's not gonna be the cause of the campaign, because I think we have other issues. But also, I don't think it's time to politicize that. I don't want to go through another constitutional crisis. But if there's an openness in Ottawa and if there's unanimity at the National Assembly, it's something that we should look at without all the emotion of the constitutional debate. It took us years and years to get out of that feud, and the last thing we want to do is to reopen it.
I will ask you just as we wrap up, because we have to wrap up, for your prediction as to how the election plays out.
Well, if you asked me that question a year ago, I would say if I win my seat, I'll be happy. But now it's going much better, so I don't know. I mean, we now
How many
have,
seats do you think you could get optimistically?
we went from 500 members to 60,000 members. We have more members now than any other party in Quebec. We went from 1% to 15 or 19% in the polls. How much are we going to go up higher? You know, I know politics enough to know that it's a roller coaster. You never know where you're going to end up. But hopefully we're going to be able to campaign on what we believe in, and hopefully we'll have as much as possible. Every single member who's going to win and who's going to represent us at the National Assembly is going to be something positive, and I hope we're going to make inroads with Anglophones in Quebec. I think it's important for us to be diverse, and I hope I would have at least one seat in Montreal among Anglophones.
Can I ask you, why do you think François Legault said no to an English debate?
It's a very good question. I was wondering why. I think because he wants to split. He wants to wedge. You know, he divided us a lot over the last 2 years.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, he divided us between vaccinated and unvaccinated, essential and non-essential workers.
French and English?
French and English, immigrants.
Allophone, French and other.
So I think he likes the politics of division, and he even wants to divide the opposition. He likes it, the fact that there's 4 opposition parties. He splits and conquer, right, as he just said, and that's what he's looking for. And I think refusing a debate this year for him, he probably made a poll and thought this would be a good thing for me.
If you are in official opposition, even with a limited number of members, can you make a difference with them having such a majority?
I do believe in democracy. I do believe that parliaments make huge difference, and the parties have you have the budget, you have the resources, you have the visibility to change things, and this is why I got involved. If I didn't believe that you can make a difference, I would be just like you guys are behind a mic, and I'd be back in my studio in Quebec City. The reason why I decided to jump in politics, exactly. The reason why I decided to jump in politics is because I do believe strongly that you can change things even in opposition.
Mr. Duhaime, we want to thank you for taking the time. Very much appreciated. Wish you good luck in the election as well. Thanks so much.
Merci, thank you.
Merci.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by Empire Gold, where turning your valuables or collectibles into cash is quick and easy, and where they always pay the most for your gold and silver. Devonshire, west of the Carry, online at empiregold.ca.